After months of complications, sleepless nights, and fragile hope, I gave birth to my son 12 weeks early. The NICU became my second home, a sterile, humming place where love had to fight for space between beeping monitors and policy blind spots. But the staff kept opening the door. Again and again. Just to feel the air, they said. While my child fought to breathe, they casually cracked open the barrier meant to protect him. I documented everything. I begged. I cried. And one day, I stopped speaking altogether. I wrote a letter. I laid it on the incubator beside my baby. Then I walked away, and I never came back. This is the story of what led to that moment, and what came after. One tells you that hope has a sound. For me, it was the soft rhythm of the incubator's ventilator, the wet click of a nurse's shoes on the linoleum, the hushed lull of monitors syncing with each heartbeat. It was quiet, controlled, sacred. Or at least, it was supposed to be. The first time I heard the NICU door open, wide, fast, thoughtless, I assumed it was an emergency. My body flinched instinctively, arms wrapped tighter around the tiny swaddle of pumped breast milk. But it wasn't an emergency. It was a tech. She yawned, leaned into the doorframe, and said to someone in the hallway, "It's stuffy in here." I needed a second to breathe. She let the door swing open. And stayed there. That was day 4. I didn't say anything. I was still bleeding from the delivery, still raw from the magnesium drips, still trying to understand why my body gave out 3 months too early. I didn't have the strength to raise my voice. Not yet.my son, Eli, weighed 2 pounds, 6 ounces. He had no eyelashes. No reflexes. No cry. His chest rose and fell with the help of machines, and every visitor was supposed to scrub in for 90 seconds and wear a sterile gown. That door was our first line of defense. It said, "You can't come in unless you're clean. You can't breathe near him unless you're careful," but they kept opening it. Sometimes it was a nurse on a phone call. Sometimes it was a janitor passing through with a mop, saying, "I just need to get some air." One day I watched a resident lean against it with her hip while sipping from a Starbucks cup, the straw visibly unwrapped. I told myself it was fine. I told myself they knew what they were doing. They had degrees, protocols, leadership. I was just a mother. A tired, overworried, underinformed mother. I told myself that, until the day Eli's oxygen dipped for the first time. It was sudden. The monitors went from green to yellow to angry red in less than a minute. The nurse rushed in, adjusted his CPAP, checked his nose for blockages. I stood back, trembling, as the alarms echoed down the hallway. The door was open. Again, that night, I went home and printed out CDC guidelines on infection risk in premature infants. I highlighted the part about air currents, about microbial transmission. I even included a diagram. The next day, I brought it in and gently handed it to the charge nurse. She smiled tightly. "We're aware of infection protocols," she said. "But thank you for your concern." I nodded. I wanted to scream. But I nodded. That was day 9. By day 14, I started keeping a journal, not the soft kind with flowers on the cover, but a lined legal pad with timestamps, quotes, behavior logs. Every time the door opened unnecessarily, I wrote it down. I thought, if I have a record, they'll take me seriously, but what they took was offense. "She's watching us like a hawk," one of them whispered when they thought I couldn't hear. They were right. I was. Because if I didn't, who would have? The door opened again on day 17. And this time, someone sneezed. That night, Eli's temperature spiked, and something in me began to crack. They called it a care conference. That's what hospitals do, soften the impact with sterile terms. But it wasn't about care. It was about me. It was day 22. Eli had stabilized after the fever, but I hadn't. My hands shook when I pumped milk. I jumped every time the intercom buzzed. I'd begun sleeping in 2-hour windows, waking up from dreams where the NICU door opened and never closed again. The social worker met me in the hallway. all pleasant smile and clipped sympathy. "We just want to touch base," she said, as if I hadn't already begged to speak with the attending physician for a week straight. Inside the conference room, a laminated fruit tray sat untouched on the table. 4 people were there: the neonatologist, the charge nurse, a patient liaison, and the social worker who, until that morning, didn't even know my last name. I sat down, clutching my notebook. My hands were damp. "We're concerned," the doctor began, flipping through Eli's chart without meeting my eyes. "Your notes about staff behavior have been shared, and while we appreciate your vigilance, it's creating tension on the unit." Tension. That word again. As if my fear was the problem. As if my baby's lungs, so tiny, so fragile, weren't worth a second of discomfort. "I've seen the door open 15 times in 3 days, I said, voice low. "I've seen food inside the NICU. I've seen masks worn under noses. My son almost died last week and you're telling me I'm the issue?" The liaison leaned forward, her voice dipped in rehearsed warmth. "We understand your concern. But we have to trust our trained staff. Monitoring door usage is not part of your role." "Not part of my role." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I pulled out my notes, flipped to the page where I'd drawn a crude map of the unit, with red XS marking each door opening. The times. The faces. The breaches. "You want to talk about roles?" I asked. "Let's talk about your role. To protect him. Let's talk about infection rates, immunocompromised infants, airborne risk. Or does that only matter when it's written in a journal and not by a grieving mother?" Silence. The kind that makes you feel like you've stepped outside your own body. Like you're watching yourself scream through soundproof glass. The doctor cleared his throat. "We hear your frustration. We'll remind staff about protocols. But we also need you to focus on your emotional well-being." There it was. The suggestion tucked between words like well-being and concern. The hint that maybe I was the unstable one. That maybe I should step back. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I stood up, picked up the untouched fruit tray, and dumped it into the trash. "You want me to be calm?" I said. "Then give me a reason to believe you care more about my son's safety than your staff's convenience." I walked out without waiting for a response. That night, I stayed past visiting hours. I sat beside Eli and read to him through the incubator wall, my voice low and steady. The monitors were quiet, for once. Just soft green and yellow pulses. Then, at 2:17 a.m., I heard it again, the door opening, not fast. Not by accident. Just a casual push from someone stepping in to ask a nurse about her lunch break. I froze. When they saw me, they stopped mid-sentence. One of them smiled awkwardly and said, "It's just a habit. It's not like the air's poison." I stood. Slowly. Walked past them. Didn't say a word. In the hallway, I pressed my back against the wall and stared at the ceiling. My legs were shaking again, and I realized something: they were never going to change. Started writing the letter 2 days after the last meeting, in the hospital cafeteria, on a napkin stained with coffee. It wasn't supposed to be goodbye. It was supposed to be proof. A way to explain myself, just in case things got worse. Just in case I broke. I didn't know then that I was already breaking. By day 27, Eli's progress was back to where it had been before the fever. Stable vitals. Soft signs of alertness. The nurse that day was kind, the kind that called him Sweet Pea and adjusted his blanket like she meant it. I wanted to thank her, but I didn't trust anyone anymore. Trust had a cost. And I couldn't afford another lie dressed up as reassurance. That morning, I watched a woman 2 incubators down open her shirt to breastfeed her twins. She was laughing with a friend over FaceTime, not wearing a mask. A nurse walked by and said nothing. The door opened 3 times in an hour. A delivery guy came in with flowers. No gloves. I stared down at Eli's tiny chest rising under the plastic dome. His fingers were translucent, like wet petals, curled tight against his palm. I imagined what a single bacteria could do to him. How something invisible could take everything from me, and no one would be held accountable that night. I didn't go home. I sat in the family room and wrote on that same napkin, pressing hard so the pen wouldn't skip. I didn't write to the staff. I wrote to Eli. You'll never remember this, I wrote. You'll never know how loud the machines were or how cold the room was. You'll never hear the things I heard or see what I saw. But I need you to know that. I tried. I tried so hard. I folded it and tucked it into my coat. Day 30 started like every other day. I brought in pumped milk labeled with my initials and the time. I sanitized my hands for the full 90 seconds. I put on the gown, the cap, the mask. I sat beside his incubator and whispered the same words I'd whispered since day one, I'm here. You're safe, but I didn't believe it anymore. The same nurse from before, the one who called him Sweet Pea, came over to adjust the monitors. I watched her closely, waiting. When she pulled out her phone and checked a message without removing her gloves, I felt something inside me turn cold. She didn't see me watching. Or maybe she did and didn't care. At noon, I stepped outside to breathe. Just for a moment. I sat on the concrete ledge across from the entrance and stared at the revolving doors. People came and went. Some cried. Some laughed. No one looked up. I pulled the letter from my coat and unfolded it. I read it again. Then I walked to the gift shop and bought a small stuffed lion with a tag that said "Be brave." It cost $12. When I returned to the NICU, I asked the front desk to page the head nurse. While I waited, I stood there, holding the lion in one hand and the folded napkin in the other. My pulse was steady. My mind was not. She arrived 10 minutes later, clipboard in hand, eyebrows already raised. I need to speak with you privately, I said. She gestured to the side hallway. I'm leaving, I told her. Today. I won't be coming back. She blinked, caught off guard. Ma'am, that's not, I've documented everything, I interrupted. I've taken photos. I've recorded conversations. If anything happens to my son, this hospital will be accountable. Her mouth opened and closed. I didn't wait for a response. I walked past her, down the hallway, through the NICU doors. One last time Eli was sleeping. Peacefully. A little stronger than yesterday. His arms had started to stretch outward when he slept, a reflex they told me was good. Healthy, I placed the lion beside him, tucked the note beneath the edge of the mattress, and kissed the glass. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't cry, I just turned around, walked out of the NICU, and kept walking. Past the nurse's station. Past the front desk. Past the parking lot, and no one stopped me, and no one followed. The next time I heard about Eli, it was from a number I didn't recognize, but that's a part of the story I'm still not ready to tell. It was a Thursday afternoon when the phone rang. 8 days after I left. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. I hadn't been answering much. Not emails, not texts. I hadn't returned to work, hadn't called my mother back, hadn't even opened the fridge in 3 days. This is Sarah, I said, my voice dry. Miss Keller? The voice asked. Male, careful, like someone reading a script. This is Dr. Hanley from Ridgeview Medical. I'm calling regarding your son, Eli. My breath caught. The world tilted slightly, just enough to make everything feel unstable. Yes? I managed. I need to inform you that there was an incident. The silence after that word, incident, felt like falling down an elevator shaft. He paused. Maybe he was giving me time. Or maybe he didn't want to say the rest. There was a contamination on the NICU floor last night. A power failure led to a temporary lapse in air filtration. 2 infants developed acute symptoms. One of them was Eli. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, steadying myself. He's stable now, he said quickly. He received immediate care. But due to your absence, we were unable to get parental consent for certain interventions. So a temporary medical proxy was assigned. What intervention? I asked. They had to intubate him, he said. He's been moved to PICU for observation. His infection markers have improved, but the next 24 hours are critical. I didn't ask anything else. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I hung up the phone and sat on the floor. I should have felt vindicated. I should have shouted, "I told you so," to no one in particular. But all I felt was the weight of something irreversible. I had walked away to protect him. I had left because no one else would act. And now something had happened anyway. Was it my fault? That question followed me as I drove back to the hospital. I hadn't planned to return. I thought walking away was the last chapter. I thought the note and the lion and the silent exit were enough. But now I was pulling into the same parking garage, heart pounding in the exact same beat as it had on day 1. At the reception desk, they didn't recognize me. "I'm Eli Keller's mother," I said. "He's in PICU now." The nurse blinked, typed something into the computer, then handed me a badge. When I entered the unit, everything looked the same: the pale walls, the soft glow of monitors, the muted chaos. But I wasn't the same. And Eli wasn't either. He was sedated. A breathing tube down his throat. His face looked smaller somehow. His hands still clenched, but slower. Less strength. A new nurse approached me. She introduced herself, said she was glad I was here. I didn't respond. I didn't care about her name. I only cared about the clipboard at the end of his bed. I wanted to see the timestamps. I wanted to see exactly when the filtration system failed. Who was on duty? Whether the door had been left open. Again, I stared at Eli, and for the first time since his birth, I felt like I didn't know what to say. He couldn't hear me. But I whispered anyway, "I came back." The nurse hovered, unsure. Then she gently handed me a sealed envelope. "It was found near his bed," she said. "The attending thought it might be from you." It wasn't. I opened it slowly. Inside was a note, neatly folded, typed, "We are conducting a full review of the incident. Please direct all inquiries to hospital legal affairs. No personnel will be made available for interviews at this time. Eli's care continues as our top priority." There was no signature, just a printed stamp at the bottom. Ridgeview Medical Compliance Division. It wasn't an apology, it was a warning. I looked at the note, then at Eli, and I realized I had documented everything. But they had lawyers, stayed beside Eli for 16 hours straight. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I barely moved. I just sat there, watching his chest rise and fall in rhythm with the ventilator. Machines buzzed and blinked around us like a language I no longer had the energy to interpret. His infection markers were down, they said. He was improving, they said. But all I saw was a baby who shouldn't have been this sick in the first place. All I heard was the phantom echo of that NICU door opening over and over again in my memory. And all I felt was fury, slow, deep, deliberate. Around 3 a.m., the attending physician came in. Not the same one from before. This one was younger. Quieter. She didn't bring a clipboard. Just a chair. "I read the file," she said. "And your notes. And your letter." I said nothing. "I have a son," she continued. "He was in NICU too. Just for 5 days. But I remember the smell of that place like it's stitched into my skin." I still didn't speak. I couldn't tell if she was trying to comfort me or distract me. "You're not wrong," she said finally. "About the air. About the door. We don't talk about it much, but, yeah. It matters. Especially for babies like Eli." I turned to her slowly. "Then why didn't anyone stop it?" She looked down, folding her hands in her lap. "Because protocol is policy. And policy is politics. And politics doesn't flinch until someone gets sued. There it was. The raw truth. What happens now? I asked. She hesitated. You could file a formal complaint. Or pursue legal action. But the hospital's already in defense mode. The letter you received? That's not a courtesy. That's a wall. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling tiles. My whole life had collapsed into legal phrases and beeping machines. He almost died, I whispered. I know. She said. But he didn't. I looked at her again. Not yet. She flinched. Maybe she hadn't expected that. Maybe she didn't know how deep the wound went. Why the next morning, Eli was breathing on his own again. No tubes. Just a small cannula tucked under his nose. His eyes fluttered open briefly. He looked at me. Or through me. It didn't matter. It was enough. The nurse came in with discharge forms. Not for Eli, for me. Consent to remain involved. In his care. A reactivation of parental oversight. The legal term for you left, now you're back. I signed without hesitation, but before I handed the form back, I asked for a copy of the NICU security footage from the night of the contamination. The nurse froze. That's not typically something we release. Then don't, I said. Just know I asked. I took Eli's hand in mine, careful not to wake him. I wasn't going to make another scene. I wasn't going to shout in the hallway or dump another fruit tray in the trash, but I wasn't done. 2 weeks later, I met with a lawyer. Not to sue, not yet. I just wanted to understand the system. The layers. The loopholes, and I kept writing. Every detail. Every date. Every crack in the story they were trying to bury under policy and polite tones. They thought I left, but I didn't. I'm still here, watching, documenting, waiting, because maybe someday, someone else's baby will need that door to stay closed. And maybe someone will listen, not because a mother screamed, but because someone finally cared enough to be afraid of her silence, and when that day comes, I want them to know, I was here first.